All right, well, how I like to run this is I don't want to just talk at you all, I want to have a conversation. So I'll just put the framework here, and it's the idea that we're living in this regenerative renaissance. There's an emergence of technology, ideas, and the requirement for humanity to shift how it's fundamentally designed. We look at history, the medieval plague, the Black Plague rather, kicked off the medieval Renaissance period. So it was that huge catalyst that actually transformed the way people were thinking, and it started the medieval Enlightenment period, which is the foundations to all of our thinking and technology and ideas today. So what is this current crisis actually the foundation of, and how do we shift civilization in order to better meet humanity's needs? So I'll do a little presentation, just throw out some ideas that we can discuss about. Here's a pretty general idea. You know, we've got a collective choice today. A lot of, talk is about going back to business as usual, trying to go back and sustain the foundations of the systems that we had before. But we also have a choice that we move forward and we build a different foundation for a different type of civilization, that we regenerate the structures of our civilization. And I know that sounds like a big concept, or a big concept is to be able to shift civilization as a whole set. But it's actually not as complex as it might sound, or especially not today. So if we look at the current foundation of civilization, this is essentially it. Every civilization is based off its food system. If the agricultural base fails, if the food system fails, the civilization fails. This was true for Rome, this was true for the Aztec Empire, the Mayan Empire, and so many others, is that they started to degrade and lose their foundation when their industrial or their food systems failed. Today, our industrial agricultural system is civilization's food system. But industrial agriculture is degrading our soil, and it's creating very toxic and damaging food. Okay, let's just mute everyone. You can unmute yourself if you want to chat. Then on top of that, we have a debt and interest-based money system. Now, the problem with debt and interest is that it requires that we continually create new money just to maintain itself. This is an inherently unsustainable system, as we have to continually transform our natural world and what was once free into money just to maintain itself. And this is why I believe one of the main drivers of ecological destruction and why we keep destroying our world and trying to convert it into money, because a lot of people are forced into that position in order to maintain the interest rates and service the debt. And then on top of this money system, we have centralized governance systems where a minority of people are in control of the majority of people. The minority of people get to make all the decisions. And then on top of this, we have what we would consider the purpose. Like, what is the purpose of civilization? You ask 100 people this question, you're going to get 100 different answers. There really is no alignment of what we're even doing collectively. And if you really tear it apart, it almost looks like the whole point of humanity is just to create more money, because that seems to be the only focus of really what we're up to. So this is currently what we're sitting with in a nutshell. And what we have the opportunity to do today is regenerate each one of these foundations. I'm just going to run through this to create what we call a cooperative and regenerative civilization. So there's a lot of ideas of regenerative agriculture, and this is agricultural systems that regenerate the soil, that sequester more carbon, that create healthier, more diverse food. You can look into things like permaculture, syntropic farming, silvopasture. There's a lot of different examples of better ways to grow food that heal our earth. And it's really interesting. There's a study that came out recently that showed that the Amazon might have actually been planted by early civilizations. And there's this part of the Amazon where there's some soil called terra preta, it's like black gold. And it's meters deep of really dense, rich, black, incredible soil that's found nowhere else throughout the Amazon. And the assumption here, or at least what this article was saying, was that it had to have been created by humans in an early civilization there. And this is what's possible with regenerative agriculture, is that we're creating incredibly dense, dark, rich soil over time, opposed to degrading our soil. So this is the foundation, is healthier food. And on top of this, we have regenerative and equitable money. So this is what I'm going to spend a little bit more time on today, because I think it's one of those leverage points. If we change the foundation of how our money system's actually designed, we could change how we interact. We could change the ultimate outcome of our daily exchanges. And then on top of this new money system, we need a new governance system that's actually governed by the people for the planet. So this wasn't possible when the old systems were getting set up. It wasn't possible to do direct governance because we didn't have internet. We didn't have blockchain to verify if your vote was actually being counted. So before these technologies, it made sense to have representatives go and represent us and other type of institutions. But we don't need that anymore. And then most importantly, we need a shared purpose. Like, what are we actually moving and striving towards? I think a very obvious one today could be the well-being of people and planet, and the regeneration of our planet. Because if we don't shift how we're interacting with our biosphere, humanity is not going to be able to sustain itself for much longer. All right, so I just presented a pretty broad scope of what I think the problem is and where we're headed. And now I want to open it up to anyone to ask any questions about, you know, this particular framework. No? Pretty good?
Hi.
That's Harrison. There you go.
Thanks for the awesome slide. My question is, how might you start to define what well-being means for people on this planet?
Yeah, see, I think that's where decentralized government comes in, because people have their own opinion on what well-being is, and they'll likely vote in favor of what they believe is going to increase their well-being for themselves and their communities, right? We have this interesting idea today where there's centralized policymakers trying to define what happiness is, or what the, you know, how do we track happiness, and how do we create a better, you know, tracker over GDP. We have like the global happiness index, and what does that even mean, you know? So we're trying all these centralized structures for trying to figure out what happiness is and how to actually enforce that. But if we give people their own voice back, they're likely going to vote in favor of their own happiness anyway. So we don't need to have to actually define what happiness means. We just say, hey, you can make decisions now, vote in your own self-interest for what's going to make your life better. And people generally will do that, right? That's the idea, is that we don't need to define this. We just give us the capability to be able to do that.
Gotcha. Cool.
But what we can define is what regeneration is. And this is what some of our partners are doing, is being able to track ecological state changes from like a degenerative to regenerative. Like, is the soil quality healthier? Is water more drinkable, etc.? And then we can use these markers to reward those behaviors. So regeneration is a little bit easier than happiness or the well-being of people, you know?
Thank you.
Cool. All right, so now we're going to dive into, I think, the crux of this, which is, you know, cooperative financial system. So here's just to set the stage, is that we've been evolving through cooperative models for some time now. Like, people understand cooperative banks, we have cooperative platforms, you know, like Airbnb, where the home renters actually own a bit of the platform. But we've opened up this new idea, which is about cooperative money, which is that the people who are in that money system actually own a piece of it. And there's a lot of cryptocurrencies out there. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that space, but the general idea is that you own a piece of it, and in a lot of cases, you're able to help govern that monetary system. So this is an entirely new concept that humanity's never had before. It's the idea of you owning your money system. But we could take this a little bit further. And if we add some more architecture and technology on top of it, we can expand this into an idea of a cooperative economy, where you own every element of your economy. Today, when central banks made, not today, but recently, central banks have made trillions of dollars. The people who are using those currencies, they didn't get a voice on whether or not this money should even be made, how it should be spent. They scarcely got any of that money for being users of it. So in reality, the value of our currency is dropping and degrading, and we didn't get any voice in it, and we didn't get any value from it. So what does it look like if we actually own every bit of the economy that we're a part of? And this is what we want to explore, is being able to give more voice and value to every participant in every element of that economy that you're participating in. Is this pretty straightforward, or is there any questions on this kind of framework that we're discussing? I wish I could see some faces. I'm just going to assume you're all following. So now I want to get into more about what Seeds is. So that's what I'm here discussing a little bit about, is this platform called Seeds. I'm a facilitator for it, and what it's framing itself as a cooperative economy. And what this means is that you own a part of it. So it's a financial system that you own a share of. And when you start creating systems like this, we have ideas of better than free. So today, when you do financial exchanges, you're typically charged fees, or in best case, there's no fee at all. But most platforms that are facilitating payments like PayPal, Stripe, Venmo, any credit card, etc., they're taking anywhere from 2.5% to 3.5%. And that's 2.5% to 3% off revenue. If profit margins are 10%, that's 2.5% of 10%, which is 25% off of profits, right? So if you really break down how much these payment processors are taking, it's massive. But we want to flip that entire idea. If we own our financial system, we can have the first ever better than free currency. So what does this look like? The more exchanges you're making, the more you're contributing to the economy and the growth and health of that financial system. And the more you contribute, the more you can get rewarded. So you can think of this as central banks saying like, hey, we're going to give money to all the people and organizations that helped grow our financial system this last quarter. So yes, we've made millions and trillions and billions. We're just going to distribute that out to all the participants of this financial and economic system, right? And this is what becomes possible. So we have this concept that we can have better than free money. And part of that new money that's being created could also be used for financing the regeneration of our planet. The reality is a lot of things we need to do today to help sustain humanity aren't profitable. Making our water drinkable again is not profitable. Cleaning up our air, not really profitable. You know, getting rid of that huge garbage patch in the Pacific, it's not really profitable. People are trying to make some money off it, but it won't be. You know, planting trees with no intention of cutting them down, not profitable. So like, how do we actually heal our planet? We just need to finance that transition. And if we're making a lot of money as humanity is doing, part of that money should and ought to be going to sustain life on this planet. And when I say making money, Seeds is doing something very novel here. Is we look at national currencies, they're losing value because national currencies are being created in excess of new demand. So if you have supply going up, but demand not matching that, then the price and the value of it is generally going to go down, right? You have cryptocurrencies, which have a fixed supply, but a change in demand. So what you see is a change in price, which is why they're extremely volatile, right? What we can do is something that's right in the middle. We can actually track supply and demand changes and grow the currency as demand changes. So you have a truly stable currency. So that as the economy is growing, we just grow more money to meet that new demand so that the purchasing power, the real value of that currency is more stabilized. So that's what I'm talking about is where we're getting this new money is just when we're creating new money when our economy and our financial system is growing. And then it's just how we distribute that money throughout the system. So that was a big concept. Many of you might not have showed up to talk about financial systems, but does that make sense, or is there any questions on that one before I move forward?
No, that's all good. Keep going.
Cool. The last piece is this idea of transparent and trustworthy. So our current financial systems are completely opaque. You know, the Department of Defense in the US said they lost, $21 trillion. How is this possible? How are you able to lose that enormous amount of money or not be able to account for it? And it's only possible because our financial systems, nobody really knows what's really going on behind those walls, right? And we need to move into an age that's more transparent and trustworthy so we do see what's actually happening behind these borders, behind these walls. You know, there's this concept of a bank run where people take their money out of the banks and they leave because they lose faith in the banks, right? And this is a common concept when people are talking about financial systems is how do you get people to actually trust this new currency? Like, how is it better than the currency systems that we're leaving? And the idea is that you actually get to see everything that's happening. So when Seeds is making new money, you get to see how those protocols are operating and how it's working, where new money is going, and you get to see every bit about it. And if you don't actually trust how it's working, if you don't like how it's working, you can change it because it's governed by all the people. So now we get rid of that concept of a bank run altogether. Because if the majority of people in Seeds didn't like how it was working, they could just change the protocols and they get to see exactly how it's working. So they get to understand that. So we fundamentally shift how we actually interact and how we can change our financial systems this way. Should I keep flowing or any thoughts? Okay, thanks guys. Cool, so it's a really big concept, but here's actually where we're at with it. Is we're starting a bunch of pilots across the globe. So these are bioregions that are being represented that are all starting different pilots using seeds and setting up their own communities. And we have about 180 different organizations that are on board as well, because a community is more than just a physical community today. A lot of communities are actually digital and borderless. And what we're doing is we're going to existing communities and existing regions, and we're saying, hey, here's a currency that's going to reward you for using it, is going to finance the things you care about, and is going to give you a direct voice. It's, better, faster, cheaper than the currencies you're currently using. Would you like to use this one? And that's our concept. Seeds isn't trying to grow its own community or its own network per se. It just wants to connect all the existing networks together and give us a shared purpose. So what we're doing is kind of uniting what we call the Regenerative Alliance. It's getting all the organizations of people together who care about the well-being of our planet, who want to shift the foundation of civilization, saying, great, all the pieces, here, this slide actually skipped a couple pieces. You guys could probably see this. So here's the concept, is that all the pieces of this new civilization, they already exist. They're already out there. They just need to be weaved and connected in together. So what Seeds is providing is this cooperative economic model, which gives a share of this financial system to every player who's a part of it. So we have that shared financial incentive to actually collaborate and work together. Because that's what's missing in today's transition cultures, is it's usually like one company saying, hey, we've got all the answers, and if you follow us, we're going to get all the benefit, and you're going to help us get there, right? But what we really need is saying like, hey, here's a framework that helps all of us work together and collaborate, and benefits are shared with all of us if we succeed. So we create this cooperative economic idea. We need money that's inherently regenerative, and that's money that's actually going to finance the regeneration of the planet and reward regenerative behaviors. So I didn't get into that at all, but organizations can make transactions that are better than free if they're regenerative. If they're not doing good things for the planet, they're just free. And then Harrison might ask, how do we know and track if they're regenerative? That's just based off community perspective. So people are giving them a score on how regenerative or degenerative they think that organization is. So very likely Amazon might get a low score because it doesn't treat workers well and it creates a lot of waste, while Amazon alternatives that are coming out that are trying to address that might get a higher score. Because what we need to do is align those incentives to actually change those ecological practices. Because in today's financial system, there isn't one. We pay way more money, we give more rewards to those organizations who are polluting our planet because there's no cost not to do so. But if we say, hey, you can actually make more money if you switch from plastic to compostable packaging, then they might actually do it, right? And that's what we need to build into our financial systems, is that incentive to do right by the people on the planet. And then most importantly, we give the governance of this whole system directly to the participants who are part of it. So it's not me or anyone who's presenting this or part of this right now that sits here and say, this is how it's governed. We say, here's a framework that allows us to collectively govern it together. And then we get into this concept of exponentially evolutionary, because as all the members are part of that, bringing their wisdom to the table and able to evolve that, it builds on top of itself, brings in more people, more wisdom, more ideas, and more evolution. So we build a platform that's better able to react to our drastically changing environment because we're able to evolve it at the go. And then we just bring in like local marketplace platforms that help utilize these tool sets to have better than free exchanges. So, I mean, the concepts are pretty simple. Grubhub and Airbnb and Uber, they all charge enormous fees. Uber Eats takes about 30% cut. So a lot of restaurants aren't even actually making money. They're just doing it to like get free advertising. But what if they had a platform that was better than free, so they can outcompete the Ubers and Airbnbs and all these current alternatives? One of them could show up, use this financial system, charge no fees at all, but the developers could still make money because they're helping grow this financial system. So we can have completely fee-free marketplaces.
So given we've only got about 5, 6, 7 minutes left, I'm curious, where are you at the moment, and what do you need help with, and what burning questions are you trying to deal with? Because I feel like we can probably get quite a bit of this on your site, and I listened to Franz talk earlier. So if you want to make this more of a conversation.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Sorry, I joined this a little bit late. I was late for a call and I have another one coming up. So it's
No, that's cool. That's
brain
cool.
scattered. I jumped into it.
No, not at all. Look, regenerative civilizations are such fascinating things. I actually just gave a talk earlier on regenerative real estate, so I'm sure there's a lot that we can kind of jam on. But I'm curious, like where you're at the moment, and what parts of this are you trying to solve for in the next 6-12 months? Because this is the opportunity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a massive concept that I was just delivering. So fortunately, we've already been at this for about 4 years. So everything I'm talking about mostly already exists. So we've already launched this passport is what we're calling it. So you can actually get it today. If you want one, I'll put my details in here and I'll send you an invite. It's invite only, not to be pious, but to make sure that bots aren't taking over, because we're giving rewards for people who are joining. So we want to make sure we build a nice web of trust to make sure that it is people, not bots. So anyway, I'll give you my email. I'll give you an invite. And we're already building the movement. So like I mentioned, that there's about 180 organizational alliances that have joined in the last several months to say, yes, we want to be part of this. We want to use the same shared financial system. We want to move together, right? So what we're currently at is just growing that. Getting more people to be able to have this, get a shared value in it, give grants to aligned organizations so that they have a shared value in this, and start running pilots. So what I mean by pilot is we want to give money to communities and then let them just start exchanging with it and seeing how it can support them. Right now is a perfect time. I hate to be so optimistic in a pandemic, but I mean, I don't think it could have lined up better to when we actually were launching, because the depression is so devastating when there's just not enough money to go around. It's not that people don't want to do anything, it's just that they don't have the money to facilitate doing anything. So what I mean by a grant is that we can give money and directly infuse it into that economy and say, here, instead of exchanging in your local currency, why don't you just do the things you wanted to do and just you can pay each other now in seeds. So we just add money to that local context to be able to help facilitate this transition.
What's your take on time banks as an alternative for local currencies as well and local economies?
I liked time banks before this type of technology because it's a good step in that direction, especially in the thinking. But sure. Time banks, I don't think took on because they weren't as easy to use as other mediums of exchange like money. But more importantly, they didn't capture the right data. So time bank, not every hour is the same. An hour from someone who spent 40 years building their practice is more valuable than an hour of someone who's just randomly doing something, right? So they weren't actually capturing the real value that went into an exchange. So that was the real problem, is they weren't as nuanced as money is, And I think that's why they didn't get as much adoption. So we get that same idea, like a time bank is the idea that you can generate value. Well, that's what we're doing with a grant. We're coming in and saying, hey, here's some value for doing those things that you care about. But yeah.
So you seed each local economy with, like, so for a pilot program, let's say I wanted to set up a pilot program where I am in Australia in the next couple of months, which is well within the realm of possibility. What does that look like as a cultivator of that pilot program? Because like as a grassroots, how do you start the grassroots regenerative civilization on a local scale? Like, how are you finding that rolls out with your pilot program so far?
Yeah, so I mean, you see we have a whole bunch of different contexts going, and they're all a little bit different. And what we're saying is grab into your community all the different players who want to be part of this pilot is the first step. So first, get a group of organizations, people together that are like, yes, we want to participate in this pilot. Second is then you ask the main, we call it a global decentralized co-op, but it's all the citizens of Seeds are voting here. Then you ask them for a grant, and it could be for anything. You just need to write it in a way that you think they're going to approve. So some grants are going on. It's like, hey, Costa Rica wants to improve regenerative development and actually finance people leaving the tourism industry and going and planting trees and creating regenerative agriculture. We have one in Sao Paulo that are creating like worker hubs. And they want to like be able to finance people coming together and reskilling themselves for this new economy. We have some indigenous communities who are just wanting to move away from tourism altogether and just completely transition their financial systems because they're tired of the nation state's currency that's been abusing them for centuries, really. So all the pilots are a little bit different in what they're wanting to accomplish and do. And that's up to you in your own local context to say, hey, what's going to serve this community the best way? Like, what do we actually want to facilitate and finance? And then you could come up with a grant, ask the main community for that grant. If you get it, then you guys get to run with that money. Cool. Any other questions? Just any type of broad stroke question that we have on anything.
Who are some of the like big thinkers in this space that you're following at the moment? So by way of example, I've been tracking Daniel Schmachtenberger and Eric Weinstein and Peter Thiel, because they've been doing some thinking around this space, particularly dealing with how do you create societies that are a little bit more empathetic past the Dunbar's number of 150 people. And it seems to be what you're kind of approaching here. There was also another book I went through recently, The Value of Everything. Marianne Matsukatu, she's great as well. Who are some of the thinkers that you guys have been following over the past 4, 5, 6 years that have inspired this platform?
You've named some good ones. I can't speak for everyone who's inspired this, because there's already a lot of minds that have showed up to this and bringing their own inspiration and stuff. But some big inspirations for me were Daniel Schmachtenberger. I'm glad that you mentioned him. Charles Eisenstein. So he wrote a book called Sacred Economics. That's a phenomenal book if you want to understand our current money system and how we can do it better. Kate Raworth, and she's actually helping on that Costa Rica project that I talked about with her donut economics model. So that's more on the economic side and how a financial system can actually support that. So it's going to be a lot of fun actually creating and playing with her. And anyway, I can't even think of anything else right now, so I'll just leave it at that. And there's probably a lot. I also feel weird like giving examples, because then I feel like I'm biasing it towards those. So I'm missing ones that were probably hugely influential without even giving them due credit, So, I mean, and we have to give a lot of credit to the cryptocurrency space, and what like Bitcoin proved for the last decade is we can create alternative financial systems. We don't need a nation state to do that for us. What Ethereum and some of these other evolutions did is say, hey, we could actually govern these systems too, and then EOSIO, which is what we're built on top of, came on and said, hey, we can make it super fast, super efficient, governed directly by the people, and we can do incredible things with it. And it's like, whoa, okay, yes, we could take this new technology then and build a different foundation for civilization. Like, our foundations are our money systems. If we change that money system, we can change everything. So that's what was really interesting, is actually the developments in the crypto space. Though most of them are kind of extreme forms of capitalism, and I think doing some of the worst, exacerbating some of the worst qualities of our current civilization. So some of them end up concentrating wealth into more hands. You look at the Gini coefficient, which is the concentration of wealth in any financial system. We have North Korea at like 0.85. We have Ethereum at 0.86 and Bitcoin at 0.86. So they're more unequitable than the most unequitable country on our planet. And that's already with less than 1% adoption, right? And as adoption scales, that concentration of wealth actually scales with it, because currency is not being made proportional to the growth of that economy. So that's, some of the dangerous side. So there's a dark side of crypto that if left unchecked and without changing the inherent protocols that are governing them, we're going to see an extreme concentration of wealth and value that is even worse than what we currently have today, rather than actually addressing that.
Yeah, and that will be accumulated by those that are playing kind of against the rules, because the incentives are to play the game a very different way than what you want the whole system to be playing for, which is exactly what's happening in the current economic system. I guess my concern is, as the transition from fiat currency to more blockchain crypto stuff, the people that are invested in cryptocurrencies early on are going to do the best out of it. But the mothers and the nurses and the healthcare workers and all those people that are actually like rely really heavily on a stable economic system are going to be the ones that hit the most, basically. So what I do think what you guys are doing really interesting, focusing on more of the ground roots industries of certain parts. So I'd love to help wherever I can. Thanks for your time. Thanks for presenting. Wish I had another half.
Great questions.
Sure,
All
who's
right.
next?
Well, I'll drop my email here if anyone wants to get in touch, get an invite. Just a number of you, so I don't feel bad giving that out. It was beautiful talking, and I'll pass it on to the next speaker because I know I'm kind of cutting into their time now. So cheers. Thanks all.